Gotta get dip. Gotta get dip. Gotta get dip. Gotta get dip.
Apple's done this deal with Beats because it really wanted to get its hands on its streaming service.
We may actually be about to see the death of the download.
Apple is fundamentally scared about what subscription services are doing to its most valuable digital music customers right now.
Buying Beats gives it a real foothold in what's going to be the future of music. Apple launched iTunes 10 years ago, and for the last decade downloading has been the kind of dominant way that you'd consume music digitally. But last year was the first year that downloads declined, but there's been huge growth in streaming, and Apple just didn't have a foothold in that.
Apple could easily develop its own music subscription service. So it's an interesting question of why buy Beats Music, a fledgling service with only about 200,000 subscribers, which is nothing compared to the 200 million iTunes music customers or the sort of near 10 million or so paying Spotify subscribers. The reason is probably to do with the product that Beats Music has created. It has a very nice user interface, and it's backed by some really big names in the music industry. Dr. Dre, famously, but also Jimmy Iovine.
Jimmy Iovine's a kind of consummate marketer. It was really his idea. He used to be very close to Steve Jobs and tried for a long time to convince Jobs to get into streaming, and Jobs always resisted. The fact that Tim Cook has kind of relented now, after Jobs has passed away, says a lot about the direction Apple's going in. And Jimmy knows how to build brands. I mean, he built the Beats brand from nothing, but with sports stars, basketball players, Premiership footballers, wearing them, plenty of free exposure, and it's a brand that young people seem to really like.
We're moving from the distribution era, when everything was about selling units of stuff, whether that be a CD, a newspaper, a magazine, a DVD, a games title off the shelf, and we're moving into the consumption era. So this is a complete paradigm shift. We're moving into an age where people want value on-demand access to content.
iPod sales are down. iPhones are purpose-built pretty much for streaming. They're not built for storing vast amounts of downloadable songs. So this deal in that context, and it makes perfect sense. Access is where the industry is heading in music and in video. Think of a company like Netflix, for example.
The iTunes Music Store acted as something of a set of velvet handcuffs on customers. So it was the inconvenience factor of thinking, well, if I switch to another device, I'm not going to have access to that store anymore. I'm going to have to do my billing detail again. I'm going to have to import my music into another music player. But when you move to a streaming subscription service, and those most valuable download customers are no longer buying from iTunes, but instead are enjoying Spotify on an app on their iPhone, well, when it comes to replacing that handset, and it's a choice between an iPhone 5S and a Galaxy S5, and the Galaxy S5 supports the exact same app that enables them to have the exact same Spotify service with the exact same playlist, then actually that velvet handcuffs lock-in no longer exists.
Streaming clearly is the future of music. You talk to the record labels and they're all ecstatic about streaming. I mean, there used to be, a record label would release, 10, 11 albums over a year, and they wouldn't have any predictability about how those albums might perform. They might get a couple of hits, a couple of duds, but streaming provides regular, reliable, recurring revenue.
Lots of artists have big concerns about the shift away from sales towards streaming, but there's a growing sense that it's an inevitable shift. This is the way things are going. So within the music industry, there's actually a lot of confidence if a company like Apple, which created such a big source of digital revenues through iTunes, is getting serious about streaming as well.
I think this is certainly the start of an arms race for streaming. I mean, I think Spotify could be the next deal that we see. We know it's looking at an IPO. If you're Google or Facebook and you don't have a play in streaming, might Spotify be a target? I mean, after this deal, we certainly think it is, and it could be up for grabs. But Apple's fired the gun on this, and it's only going to get more competitive from here on.